Hello, everyone. We're live, we hope. Good evening.
Good evening.
We are just going to do a brief chat about that topic that often comes up with different nutrients about measuring nutrients in the blood or in the urine. And, are they accurate? Are they reliable? And what do you need to do following a particular measurement in your blood work? Malcolm, you're going to do most of the talking. We really welcome questions throughout. We won't be doing a presentation or anything. Malcolm's just going to chat about a few of the different nutrients that that come up from time to time.
Yes, it's sort of part of a general obsession with taking measurements, isn't it? Like with our devices and recording our sleep and wanting to measure everything. This is about measuring nutrient levels in the body. And in general, our approach to nutrition is not nutrient-based. Like there's not one food for one nutrient. No, this is marketing, red meat for iron, dairy for calcium, all that sort of stuff. It's not reality. Neither do we wish to confuse food with nutrients. You'll never hear me say to Jenny, what protein will we have on our plate for dinner this evening? The body's ingenious about the way it's able to maintain its internal milieu, its homeostasis across a wide range of nutrient intakes. Nonetheless, deficiencies do occur, even in an affluent country like Australia. Then there's the question about whether the optimal amount of some nutrients might be more than the minimum amount required to prevent deficiency. Sometimes the opposite's true. If you take calcium tablets, calcium supplements, you increase your risk of having a cardiovascular event. Vitamin E supplements seem to be bad for heart disease. Beta-carotene supplements, beta-carotene in food associated with less lung cancer. In supplements, more. But can't we just take our blood levels to measure our nutrient levels? I remember reading Nathan Pritikin's book when he embarked on his diet back in the 50s, and everybody said, you can't do that. You can't eat, stout plants and whole grains and things like that. And so you'll get deficient. So he had dozens of measurements. But this is not very useful at all. Because we can't just take measurements to check nutrient levels. Well, we can, but they're not reliable. Generally, the body will work to maintain blood levels at an optimal level until the nutrient is pretty much completely depleted. And we'll try and maintain the levels when we take too much until we get up to very toxic levels. So let's take a look at some of the common tests that are performed to measure nutrient levels in the body. Starting with vitamin B12. It can be easily measured, requested in your pathology test in Australia. Up till now, I've been requesting what's called active B12, holotranscobalamin. They're the active form of vitamin B12. But I've noticed that at least one of the labs has started charging people for this because Medicare will give the lab a rebate for measuring total B12, but will only give the laboratory extra money for the active form if the total amount's low. Fortunately, the two correlate fairly well. There's usually, if one's on the low end, so is the other one. So you could just measure total vitamin B12. When you get a measurement back and it's above the reference range is meant to sort out deficiency from adequacy. So the machines are not interested in reading very high levels. Generally, this is sort of mostly harmless to have high levels of B12. But if your test is above the range and just says more than whatever the number is, it may indicate that you're taking more vitamin B12 than you need. Vitamin D is the next one on my list here. And And again, there's a blood test available for this, but Medicare's onto this B12 and D, and doesn't want doctors, as sort of told us, it doesn't want us doctors taking too many measurements, or else we might get a visit or a letter from them. I haven't had one yet. And the measurement for vitamin D measures a storage form of vitamin D, which lasts and can get you through many weeks, even a month or two. And there's a seasonal variation in vitamin D levels because of the seasonal variation in ultraviolet B levels. And it's not super accurate. So we have to remember that this, again, like many measurements, vitamin D is an approximation. And there's worldwide disagreement about what's optimal, and many studies have looked at supplementing people and not found much benefit. In Australia, more than 50 is the sort of standard. Some other countries choose a lower cutoff for normal. Some groups, organisations suggest a higher cutoff for normal. So that's vitamin D measurement. Iron. Iron is the most common nutrient deficiency probably in the world, and particularly in premenopausal women. Ferritin is the most useful measurement because it's sort of a proxy for the total amount of iron that your body has, like in storage as a reserve. But like many other nutrient measurements, it is an approximation. The other measurement is transferrin saturation. That's how much iron the carrier protein has on it in the blood. Again, it's approximate. And then looking at the doctor may look at the hematology, the red blood cell profile, to sort of look for signs of deficiency. But there's a catch with measuring iron. It's not extremely accurate, and inflammation messes with the measurement. Like as soon as you have any infection going on in the body or inflammation, perhaps even some poor metabolic health inflammation, transferrin, the body drives down how much is being carried in the blood, so you get a low transferrin saturation. At the same time, the ferritin that indicates the amount the body has stored is one of the proteins that go up when there's inflammation and acute reaction. Therefore, if you've got some inflammatory condition, infection, even perhaps poor metabolic health, then your ferritin may overestimate how much iron you store, and the transferrin saturation may be alarmingly low. I often also include a C-reactive protein when I measure iron to sort of try and sort of look at whether there's a lot of inflammation. Zinc measurement has been popular among alternative and conventional GPs. Experts, what they say about the measurement, it's actually a very unreliable measure. Like it fails to sort out who's really deficient and who's not deficient. So the experts say that we should probably only use blood zinc levels to sort of look at a whole population of people and sort out which populations or which demographics might be low in iron. They also say that where it's suspected that there really is zinc deficiency, I don't think I've ever seen a patient with zinc deficiency, and I have seen one with scurvy, then the measurement for zinc would also be combined with the deficiency symptoms and maybe a dietary history, like the person was only having brewed beverages and no food perhaps, or not eating, to sort out whether there really was deficiency, but not just the blood test on its own. Sodium's come up quite a lot recently. Sodium's part of the electrolyte panel, sodium, potassium, bicarbonate, chloride, sometimes magnesium. Sodium's extracellular in the body. That is, it's in the blood, gives the volume to the blood, and also it's throughout the tissues of the body, in between the cells. And the body uses the amount of sodium it hangs on to regulate how much fluid there is in the body. And if sort of parts of the heart, the kidney go, oh, look, we seem to be a bit low on the amount of fluid, then they'll hang on to more sodium to try and puff up the volume of the body, because once the body hangs on to the sodium, the system that determines how dilute the urine is will decide to hold on to the appropriate amount of water to get the sodium concentration right. A slightly low sodium level on your blood test, I wouldn't worry about it. Most often it means you drank too much water before the test. Like, do not drink 1 liter of water before you go in for your blood test. It's too much. Some medications can also do it. Classically, some of the diuretics, but there are a few medications that can do it. It happens during ultra endurance, sporting events, intense sporting events lasting many hours, when people drink too much water, and they can end up becoming quite unwell. Because if sodium levels get well below the normal levels, not just under it, but well below it, you become quite unwell. So what's the solution? We repeatedly hear people say, well, my whatever suggested that I just eat more salt. That's not really the problem. The problem is the body holding on to too much fluid, too much water. And if you have a lot more salt, then the same factors that caused low sodium to start with will come into act again, and you'll just hold on to enough water, the body will hold on to enough water so that your sodium concentration is again low, but this time you will have puffed up the volume of fluid, and you might have puffy fingers and puffy ankles and higher blood pressure, for example. The cause can be difficult to find. Is there anything about excess water intake?
Well, a few cases that have come to my attention recently have been where the person has been drinking, a lot of water, a lot of fluid. And whilst we do give the message to make sure you have, a good water consumption throughout the day, maybe there are times when people overdo it a bit. So, we want you to be drinking a healthy amount of water, but not smashing in many litres a day. And Autumn has said that excess water intake can cause kidney issues.
Yeah, the kidneys can only dump something like 3/4 of a litre of water an hour. So, you can imagine over a couple of hours you could exceed that. I don't know what happens. I never understood how people can, drink 6 pints of beer, for example. I guess if they've had 6 pints of beer, they probably don't notice if the low sodium is making them go wobbly. It's maybe part of the effect. Anyway, I digress. Iodine. Iodine can be measured as a urinary iodine level, which is also adjusted, for how dilute the urine is. But it's not at all reliable for measuring how much iodine the body has stored. And the body stores iodine in the thyroid gland, because it's the only thing the body uses iodine for, to make thyroid hormones. And so the thyroid gland tends to squirrel away some iodine for a rainy day. And so the urinary iodine is more measures your recent iodine intake, like how much iodine you had over the last day. So as a once-off measurement, it's not particularly useful. Mainly nowadays, if I measure it, it's mainly because someone's using, Lugol's or someone else's iodine drops that may be extremely concentrated, or taking kelp products, both of which can lead to iodine toxicity. And I have seen some very high urine iodine levels in people using some of these foods and products.
Were you going to talk about the difference between the 24-hour and the one-off? Because the one-off iodine level, I believe, your iodine will vary throughout the day, even, independent of what you've been eating. But they say the slightly more reliable is to do the 24-hour.
Anyone done a 24-hour urine test recently? We do them for various things in medicine. And it means you have to carry around a plastic bottle, or if you drink plenty of fluid and plenty of water-rich, foods, you have to carry around. You have to get the lab and say, "Look, can I have 2 plastic bottles to fill up with water, please?" It's a little bit inconvenient.
The other issue is that the actual measurement is not meant to be done for assessing the individual. When you read the literature, when you read the sort of nutritional, what's that? We should have brought the reference book in here.
Assessment of nutrient adequacy.
Yeah, it's more at the population level to work out. You measure thousands of people and find out whether that area might be iodine deficient. But as an assessment of the individual, it is not reliable.
I suppose if you did it every day for a few weeks, I think Medicare would complain about that. Lastly, we'll just touch on omega-3s. I remain skeptical about the validity and usefulness of measuring omega-3 status. We don't really know exactly how much the body needs, and it's sort of very much in proportion to how many omega-6s and how many other fats you have in your diet. So you can measure omega-3 status using an omega-3 index, which measures the proportion of omega-3 essential fatty acids in the red blood cell, which is something that stays in the blood for a few months. And therefore, it's sort of less influenced by day-to-day omega-3 intake than just measuring it in the serum. But I think we'll finish up our little nutrient talk at this point and leave the whole omega-3 issue for another session.
Another session, yes. Did you want to finish your conclusion? And then anyone who has any questions, please pop them in the chat and we'll get to them.
Most nutrients cannot be reliably measured. Yep. We need to move on from the deficiency-based approach to nutrition and instead focus on just eating a diversity of whole plant foods, which will not only supply us with most of our nutrients, but also countless phytonutrients, which no one measures, but are essential for good health. We recommend that everyone on a plant-based diet take a vitamin B12 supplement, and if there's inadequate sun exposure, perhaps a vitamin D supplement. Take an iron supplement only if you have established iron deficiency, at least until the cause is resolved. Don't take supplements just in case. They're isolated, concentrated nutrients that have been taken out of their normal context of food. At best, they'll be a waste of money. At worst, they will actually harm your health.
So, is there anyone who wants to post a question before we finish our little mini presentation on...
It was sort of a mini presentation, Jenny.
That's what we said we'd try and do, at least monthly. I think Celtic salt, is it any better or worse than regular salt? Well, in a sense, salt is salt in terms of its impact on the body. If you're taking any fancy salt that's marketed as having particular additional nutrients other than sodium,
like other minerals,
note that to get any useful amount of those nutrients, you would have to be consuming salt at a dangerous level. So we certainly don't recommend, if you're going to use salt, it may as well be nice and cheap table salt, maybe iodized salt, so that you at least get a little bit of iodine that way. But we would, rather than tell someone to have iodized salt for their iodine, we would rather recommend sea vegetables, dulse flakes, wakame flakes, or nori wrappers, which you can just buy at the supermarket and chop up. So yeah.
There's a new salt. There's a new salt, Jenny, on the market. Yep. And that is salt that's sodium chloride and partly potassium chloride. Our plant-based diet has a much more potassium than sodium in it, or should do, unless we're pouring salt on it. So the potassium salt is like a mixture of sodium chloride and potassium chloride. So and the potassium still has a bit of a salty taste, but has less sodium load on the body. And there've been some studies done that show that the health outcomes are better in people who are pouring salt on their food and having it in excess when they use the mix than straight sodium. They could just stop pouring it on their food and use lemon juice and vinegar and other things, couldn't they? I hadn't thought of that.
There's another one about the seaweed intake. Is this okay for salt intake and iodine? Well, yeah, we recommend, just a modest amount. You don't need to be having much of these. We had a little bit of seaweed with our lunch, didn't we? It was
some wakame flakes. Yep.
And, just a few days a week. Doesn't have to be a daily thing.
It depends where you live as well. Like Southeast Australia, in Southeast, as much as we say get all your food for nutrients and don't get hung up about it, I'll have to confess that that we think, Southeast Australia is a little bit low in iodine. We'll eat a few sea vegetables, but we'll also think that there are all sorts of phytonutrients and other nutrients in those sea vegetables as well. So it's not just a source of iodine. Another little tweak we do is thinking, well, there's probably plenty of omega-3s in our green leafy vegetables and a few in the soy and this and that. And we don't eat a lot of the sort of competing omega-6, oils from nuts and seeds and oil. So we probably don't really need to do anything, but we do eat a little bit of ground flax in our porridge. Not a huge amount, but that's sort of being a food. It's not just for the omega-3s. Flax also has some very beneficial types of fiber and other nutrients in it. What can't flax do?
So Tanya's asked, how can I know if I drink too much water? That's a really interesting question. One of the things that we found over the years of working with people that often, and I find this, I'm postmenopausal, find this with older women that often, you'll hear people say, just let thirst be your guide, and that's all you need to worry about. And they'll also say, eating the whole food plant-based diet, lots of water, don't worry about it. Just when you eat, drink when you're thirsty. We've found that there's a relationship between inadequate fluid intake, particularly in the first half of the day. You wake up in the morning and you're dehydrated. You need to, over the next few hours, kind of get some water in. And if you're finding yourself really thirsty late in the day, it's kind of too late. And I've certainly found myself, and I know with some others, whereby if you get a little bit dehydrated, you're more likely to suffer, maybe some night disturbances, not necessarily, hot flashes, but just, a temperature dysregulation or being just a little bit, awake in the middle of the night. So it's a tricky thing because you could go too far and be drinking too much water that you don't need. So very hard to answer that question. How do I know if I drink too much? I guess if you're running to the toilet, every half hour, that's too much. But of course, that could be caught up in pelvic floor issues. You might be running to the toilet because you're not able to hold on to much.
The volume of urine and the darkness of it would be somewhat of an indicator, looking at how much comes out.
And there's a comment about how much is too much. Having a certain amount of mils per hour, too much in a short time frame will tax the kidneys. And based on your BMI, maximum intake is 3 litres. But I would not recommend someone actually drink 3 litres of fluid because you'd be getting some of that from within your food.
When someone once said, that you need so many cups per day of fluid, they were actually measuring the total intake of people who they thought were having an adequate amount, including the water in food. And on a whole foods plant-based diet, hopefully all eating lots of fruits and vegetables and cooked whole grains and legumes, we get quite a lot of water.
The only thing to throw that spanner into that is that eating a high fiber diet, you do actually need a bit more water to help it all through. So
yeah, I guess some of the food and the water just goes to the bulk that's sort of passing on through.
It's a tricky question, and what I found useful is maybe just monitor your water intake, even for just a couple of days. I will often fill a 2-litre because I work from home. Obviously, if you're getting your water from different sources, this won't work. But a 2-litre bottle, and it's my mission to mostly get through it. But I don't necessarily finish that 2 litres because I might also have a cup of tea. I might have a drink of water when I'm somewhere else. So, I'm not rigid about it, but that just gives me an idea. And my mission is to make sure I've maybe drunk at least half of that, drunk at least a litre in the first half of the day. So.
Yes, I think you can get into a habit of having of ignoring your thirst and having a low water intake. Particularly if you're sort of a bit concerned about, using shared toilets and public toilets and inconvenience.
Yeah, thank you. I meant to loop back to that and say that often women, if you've been in a profession where it's really hard to take toilet breaks, that a lot of women, over time suppress like that. They're no longer responding to the thirst, to their thirst. And so I kind of call it, that thing of let thirst be your guide isn't necessarily going to work for everyone, because there's plenty of people, as I say, particularly if you're traveling or you can't always get to a toilet. Happens more with women that they drink far too little, and when they do monitor it, they discover that they're only drinking a few glasses in the day. So
I think also how fussy people are about their water intake. I mean, I've as coming from a bit of running, athletic sort of background, I've always been happy, maybe because I was at boarding school and didn't learn much culture or something. I've always been happy to stick my head sideways under the tap in the bathroom and slurp a bit of water, as I go about my business.
Karen has said she came in late. Did we cover this? Did we cover
you can
zinc?
Listen to the recording.
So you'll be able to listen to the recording. Yes,
Yep.
Malcolm did cover
the long
zinc.
and the short of, on an individual basis, it's not worth measuring because it's unreliable.
Okay, any other questions? I think we've covered all the ones that have come in. So this is all. I always think this is fun. Once we worked out how to do this, how to do a live stream, it's nice that we can just come online and chat and have, at least I think we've got about 15 people at the moment watching. So that's great. So thank you for joining us this evening, and obviously this will be available as a replay once we've finished. So good night, everyone.
Until the next episode.
Great.